Hey guys, my name is Rachel, and on my channel I talk about reading and writing. Today we're gonna wrap up some books that I've read in the past like handful of months that I haven't talked about yet. I think only one has made it in one other video that I recently put up. So my cat is doing that thing where he wants to chew on everything, so this is already exhausting. We are not chewing. We're not chewing. We're not. I do want to start off talking about my one DNF from this kind of time frame. And I'm really sad about it. So, There Will Come a Darkness by Katie Rose Poole. I made it through like 100 and some pages and I was like, not for me. So this one is a YA fantasy. So this is going to just go into my classroom library at this point. It's about these people that are waiting for like a prophet, and they're like kind of pseudo Greco society type thing, and you're following a large cast of characters, and there are storylines you're supposed to converge, and you're supposed to see what they bring to the table in this conflict. And like, I was bored mostly. That's kind of mostly the problem. You know, even though you're following all these different characters, I just couldn't, within the first 100 or so pages, I just didn't find myself caring a ton about any of them. I felt like the writing was a little bit plot dumpy, like a lot of telling rather than showing. And then I also I felt like the dialogue felt kind of unrealistic. These characters are supposed to be teenagers, right? But they don't feel like teenagers at all. Like, even in the context of a fantasy world, to me, it felt like there was no reason why these characters wouldn't just be adults. But that's just my perspective. I really liked the world, and like there's one thing that the description doesn't talk about at all, the synopsis. One thing that's really important to the story is everyone has these, well, not everybody, but a lot of people are born with these like graces. So you have this like power set, and there is a person that has come along, a ruler that's starting to take root called the Hierophant, and he and his followers want to just get rid of everyone with graces and get rid of people just having them in general. I don't know. I feel like there were a lot of cool elements. The world itself, I think, was cool. It just the way that it was done wasn't really for me. So yeah, I put this one down. This was my DNF for the period. So the next one I read on Kindle, I read The Exorcist by William Peter Blatty. And I read this one because I've not actually watched the full movie. Because I've seen parts of it, and just the way that the special effects are done, it just looks way too grody and weird, and it's just like, I couldn't take it seriously. So I've never actually sat through the entire thing. I know that it's supposed to be really iconic, and I know somebody that really recommended the book to me, that they said that even though this is like a 70s book, that it was just really creepy. And I was like, oh, okay, I'll try it. And so keep in mind, I'm like a light horror girly. I don't really like a lot of like extreme forms of horror or anything too gory. I love ghosties and like a possession story now and then. I'm a supernatural horror girly, okay? And so The Exorcist is obviously a possession story about this little girl that's possessed by a demon. And it was a lot nastier than I thought it was going to be. Like, it was really spooky. I gave this 4 to 5 on Goodreads because I felt like overall, definitely tense, scarier than I thought it was going to be for the time, especially. Like, I feel like it holds up very well today. And the ending, like the way that this kind of situation was resolved, wasn't totally what I expected. So that was good. I liked our characters, especially the priest that's going to do the exorcism. He was really interesting to follow. Father Carras, I think is his name. This is the one that I read like the longest ago, so the details on certain things are a little bit fuzzy. I was super engaged the entire time. I just felt like it was really well done. There were certain things at first I was like, wait a second, why is this little girl's mom, why is she like this actress? Like, I just felt like it was weird that we were gonna set kind of random that they were centering this story around somebody that's the child of somebody famous. But then I quickly realized it's because it shows that woman has the time, energy, and money to be able to take her daughter Reagan to all of the doctors that she could possibly find. She kind of has this endless money pile, and you could still see how it's impacting her career, but we never have to worry about them being on the streets or anything like that, so we can really just focus in on the possession issue in itself. I feel like this author doesn't hold back at all on some of the messed up things that are happening. Like, some of the, like, assault of this kid, I was just kind of like, wait a second, is this even in the movie? Were they allowed to put this in the movie? And I asked one of my friends, and they said that that's kind of a thing, so that's gross and scary. And it was at that point I almost put the book down, but I was like, you know what, it's not going to get worse than this, so I kept going. And ultimately, I'm happy I finished it. It is a really good book. I feel like I learned how to write evil from it, because I feel like it's really difficult. I find it hard to write villain characters accurately, especially in the context of the supernatural. You're not just like an everyday kind of like not nice person. So I feel like this book taught me how to write evil more than any other book has. I think that if you're going to effectively write something that is evil and sinister, it should probably make you feel uncomfy reading it and writing it, right? So, I don't know. I think there's something about this book where that just kind of hit me. And only thing with this one is sometimes the writing, I don't know if it was stuff that people said in the 70s or what, but some of the things that they kept saying to each other, like, how's doing? Like, who says that? Like, I asked my mom if she remembered anyone saying that in the 70s. She said no, but like, maybe this is I don't know, maybe this was like a regional thing. I'm not sure about that. Also, why the heck? I mean, this girl's name's Reagan, right? They're calling this girl Rags. Like, that's her nickname. Like, that, I would hate to be called Rags. That's terrible. But yeah, that was really good and really spooky. I'm persevering in my Y2K nostalgia series sweep. I read the third wrap-up, or omnibus, I don't know how to say that. This one has The Calling, Changeling, and Strife. And one of my complaints about the series, I mean, it is like YA from like 2001 or whatever, so there's that. The vibe is different. I've complained that this series is very predictable. I will say there was a couple moments in here that it didn't happen the way I thought it was going to, so I think that the author's getting stronger with that. And, I don't know, I just felt like about halfway through this, I was kind of getting to the point that the series is feeling a little bit repetitive. The predictability was kind of catching up to me. Like I said, I was pleasantly surprised a few moments in this one, though. And there are some moments where I fear that there may be too many characters for each teeny tiny little installment. But if you're not familiar with this, it is about a teenage witch named Morgan, and in the first book of the series, she discovers that she has powers in the first place and that she is a very powerful blood witch who is adopted. So yeah, by the time that you're in this set of books, we have issues with her birth father. We have her trying to protect her boyfriend Hunter. And we have a lot of her morality coming into question. Like, she wants to be a very good witch. She doesn't want to abuse her power, and that's like a big concern here. And she's always pulled in by dark magic, especially when you consider that like a lot of witches from the clan that she's from use it. So yeah. Is it the best thing? No. Is it the worst thing? Absolutely not. I'm reading it for funsies on occasion. I will get to the last two bind-ups of the series eventually. I also read like a decent amount of poetry this time. So I read this one, which I feel like would be the lesser known out of anything I've read, 45 by Frida Hughes. If you don't know who Frida Hughes is, she is the daughter of poets Sylvia Plath and Ted Hughes. Okay, so that's cool. But I didn't want to read this book just because I consider Sylvia like my favorite poet. I wanted to read it because I read one of Frida's poems online and it absolutely knocked my socks off. It was that good. So 45 is one poem for each year of her life from birth to age 45. And I think that it's so unfair that her parents are Sylvia and Ted, because I noticed a lot of reviews, they just inevitably kind of compare her to them. And I don't know. I think that that's really messed up, especially like comparing her to her mom. Like, come on, she is her own person. And so each poem isn't as cohesive and tight as you might expect, but it's supposed to capture each year of her life. So it's kind of part memoir, part poetry collection. So I didn't have an issue with this at all. You learn a lot about her perspective if you know the story about Sylvia Plath and her suicide. You learn about at what age she found out what really happened. You learn about her kind of different marriages throughout her life, and or relationships, I guess I should say, sometimes marriages as well, and kind of what went wrong at different points, her relationship to her art and her writing. We also get to see my biggest takeaway, I think, was the poems about her stepmom. Those, like, Frida's, like, seems to have hit some level of radical acceptance about this, but, like, I read this and I just hate the stepmother. And I really don't like Ted Hughes either. I pretty much hate him as well. Frida does not feel that way about her dad. That is just the conclusion that I personally come to as an outsider, so I don't want to dog on everyone too much here, but I just can't imagine marrying a man whose previous wife killed herself and orphaned two children, and just not showing those kids any love and affection. I just don't understand. I mean, I think it's crap to come into any marriage knowing that there are children involved and not being willing to, like, be the stepmother that you're supposed to be and be, like, a maternal figure in their lives. That's trash anyway. But to top it off with the fact that, like, their mom died and she's, like, I was not happy about it. I was not happy with Ted Hughes for just kind of letting this happen. So, yeah. I think that the poems were well done and interesting. And yeah, they're definitely, like, minimalist but not, which is exactly how I like my poems. So that was nice. Was every single poem like, wow, knockout, punch me in the face? Like, what? No. But overall, I loved the overall quality. There were some really, really shining moments in here. And I do want to read more of her work. So that's good. So since I was so amped up about Frida Hughes' collection, I did finally read the full collected poems by Sylvia, her mother. So Sylvia Plath, I read her collection Ariel and really loved it. And she's one of those poets where there are some poems that she writes where some of it totally goes over my head, and not every single poem she ever writes resonates with me, but the ones that do, like I said, she's my favorite poet, even though I don't necessarily love every single thing, right? That's how good she is when she's good, in my opinion. So the collected poems, like, her early stuff, because it's organized by year, it's just, like, longer, more dense. The language is, like, really lofty, sophisticated, and whatnot. But then as we get closer to the end of her life, that's when she starts using those more minimalist structures that we know her for, which the structure itself I don't not necessarily care about. It's just what she's doing with the language within that structure. So instead of having this dense, lofty language, she's writing a little bit more simply, like, in the sense that she's using less big fancy language and a little bit, like, more scaled back, but she's still using complex images and concepts in her work, just tighter. And because it's so much tighter, every line hits, right? So I'm very happy I finally decided to read this. So since I do prefer her later stuff, and it is organized by year from, like, 1956, which is where the collection starts, I only liked a few. Actually, I only marked how many? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I literally marked 5 from that set that I really enjoyed. 57. 1. She didn't write that much at 57. 58, there's a cluster that I really liked of, like, 5 almost in a row. And then once we hit 1959 onward, that's when I was marking down a lot of them, being what I really liked. So, yeah. I just think that her poems are just so beautifully written. She plays with language unlike anyone I've ever seen before, just the way that she does it. And I feel like a lot of the times she's known for really dark subject matters. But, like, it sucks though because she has a lot of really beautiful, peaceful, happy poems too. Like, she can really capture just about any moment and any concept. But yeah, Sylvia is just super dear to my heart, as she is to many people. So this collection was edited with an introduction by Ted Hughes, who I don't like. And so some of the footnotes, like, some of them are helpful, but some of them we kind of can tell would have been written about things about Ted that he probably wasn't caring for. I found myself Googling a lot of information, and as a result, I'm really tempted to read the book Red Comet, which is a biography of Sylvia Plath. The problem is it's like 1,000 pages, and that is more information than anyone needs to know about anybody, right? But I am like really curious. So I think what I might do someday is at least just like maybe get it from the library and just flip through some sections that I really am interested in to learn. But yeah, this was very, very good. I gave this one, even though I don't love every single poem, she is my favorite, and I love being able to see her development as a poet and how her style has morphed and changed over time. I gave this a 5. So I did read one other poetry collection that I'm going to talk about briefly, The Book of Love from Rumi. So Rumi's like all over the internet, right? But I've never like sat down and read full work by Rumi. And so problem that I have, I do appreciate that Coleman Barks put in his like translations in addition to commentary, because based off of his commentary, like Rumi wrote like much longer pieces, like a lot of his poems just kind of flowed together, and he just took out like the highlights. So that makes a lot of sense to me, because there were some times where I'm reading this, I'm like, this is beautiful, but I feel like I'm totally missing the context here. That would be why. I give this a 4 out of 5. There are some moments that really jumped out at me again, but then there's some that just kind of like don't. The context, the missing context for some things just made a lot of it kind of go over my head. And one thing that I was disappointed about after I got this edition is that Coleman Barks doesn't know Persian. So like, it says that he translated it, but like he didn't. He read other people's translations and made it into his own translated translation. Yeah, so in the future, I will probably, like, if I pursue any more Rumi, I will find a translator that actually translated the Persian. Because who knows, maybe that also kind of impacted the flow and the missing context that I felt like I needed. I did appreciate in this edition, though, that we have context, I know I said that I have no context within the poems. However, there are like, the poems are sectioned, and at the beginning, Coleman Barks would talk a little bit about, like some of the themes that that Rumi is talking about. Because the poems are organized by theme. So like we have that general context, like what am I about to be reading about? I'm just talking about within the poem itself, like the specific things that are being addressed. That's where I'm missing kind of the context. I could tell that pieces of the poems are not there. I hope that makes sense. So yeah, I read that one. That one was really different for me. Then I read some nonfiction. I read Dreamland by Sam Quinones. I actually ended up reading the young adult edition because that was on sale. And I don't have that one anymore because I put it in my classroom library. And it is about America's opiate epidemic, and I learned so much from this. I talked about this recently in my favorite nonfiction video, because I made it onto the list even though I literally just read it. It talks about how the opioid crisis was like a 2-part issue in America, starting off in Ohio, which is where I live. So on the one hand, you had prescription pain pills like Oxy being just shelled out like literal candy, pushed by pharmaceutical companies, and then enforced by these pill mills that started to emerge, starting in Ohio and then spreading to other places where people could just get pain medication without providing much research without providing much reason or doctors really suggesting anything else. And they were stacking Oxy and Valium on top of each other for people to take, and it was getting people super hooked. You had to pay cash when you got to these like pill mills, where these doctors were just kind of like, oh, you're in pain, okay, cool, here's a pill, bye. Like there were times where they're spending 90 seconds with a patient with no notes. So on the one hand, we have that happening, and then perfect timing. By perfect timing, I mean also imperfect timing. The black tar heroin coming in from a very specific part of Mexico, and that was kind of weird to me too. I never imagined that it was all just kind of like a bunch of people from one city came in to sell, and people that were already hooked on oxy needed a cheaper way to maintain their addiction. And so then they turned to black tar heroin, which was coming into the country in droves. And so it kind of talks about how these two forces work together to create the hot mess of an opioid epidemic that we have. I thought it was very insightful, since this is something that has impacted my community and people that I know. It definitely hit close to home, and it kind of helped me understand that it really was, everything that I've seen happen really did follow a very large pattern. And I now kind of understand why this was able to happen in the first place. And it's really harrowing to read some of the statistics and to like know people that fell into some of them. So, very insightful. And since it was the young adult edition, it was a little bit more condensed, you know, mess around at all, getting to the important information. And I saw some people online complain about that for the YA edition, but then people that read the adult edition said that it was way too repetitive. So, like, I think that I got plenty of info just based off the YA edition. So, I definitely recommend it if this is a topic that interests you, if it also kind of hits close to home. I feel like it's just, it puts things into perspective. It kind of, like, you know, why did something like this happen? This pretty much tells you. And last but not least for this wrap up, I read Newsletter Ninja, How to Become an Author Mailing List Expert. And this is by Tammy Lebrec. Sure, it looks very French. I don't know how to pronounce French. And so I got a very used copy on eBay for this because I wasn't sure if I would ever look back at this again. But I'm thinking about creating an author newsletter, more about that sometime soon. And it looked like this would be a good source for this. I did learn a lot. I have a ton of notes. And I'm hoping to craft a really fun newsletter with some kind of little perks. So just be on the lookout for that. This book helped me a lot. So yeah, I really came into this video with like no notes, just vibes. So I'm hoping that I made a lot of coherent sense here. And I'm hoping, I know that some of these books I read kind of like a longer amount of time ago. So like I never talked about The Exorcist on this channel, and I read it in October. So if it sounds like I don't really remember it that much, I promise you I read it. It's a little bit hazy, you know? So hopefully this made sense. I hope that we are all reading lots of things. I hope that wherever you're at, the sun is out, especially my northern hemisphere homies. Listen, Ohio gets like no sunlight in the wintertime. Every single day this week, we're supposed to be like 60s, 70s Fahrenheit. Sun most days. Guys, I'm about to go on so many walks. I wish I was an audiobook girly because then I could listen as I walked. And I'm not an audiobook girly because I'm a snob about audiobooks. I think that they're fantastic. I'm a snob about people's voices. So I can't really do them that much. But yeah. But maybe I'll even be reading in the sun. Let me know what you guys have been reading in the comments. Thanks for sticking around and have a fabulous day. Bye.